Notes for the Planetary Transition and the Law of Return by Daniel Gagliardo. Notebook 3. Our mission is like the construction site of a large building, only we do not know in most cases in which part of the scaffolding we will be placed. Each correct and necessary action is a brick of that construction. If our existence is limited to expressing what is correct and necessary, that portion of that construction that corresponds to us will be concrete. The indication of what is right and necessary will come to us from the depths of our consciousness. The transcendence of our scale of personal values, of our free will, will give us the capacity to put each brick in its place. The soul guides the hands of the builder when he humbly opens himself to the essence of wisdom. We are all here to perform a single task. We are all here to express the evolutionary plan and the law of the hierarchies. The secret of our mission lies in forgetting ourselves, understanding the importance of our capacity to give and transform, to abdicate as far as our impulses of choice and convenience are concerned. We have been prepared for thousands of years to understand the fundamental attitude for this planetary transition. Note 13. A few weeks ago, we were getting ready to have one of our regular talks meetings. A collaborator brought in batches the questions that accumulated inside the trays placed in the anteroom of the auditorium. These consultations and stories that come to our knowledge allow us to perceive, in general way, some of the elements that could interfere in the development of these meetings. As if united by a subtle thread, we formed sets of consultations and comments. On that occasion, one of the most insinuated energies spoke to us of the great need that some people were experiencing to know what their mission in brackets would be in this incarnation. Some of these beings committed to certain games of forces naively ask us to give them clues about their future. In some cases, they even ask us to reveal such ambitious information. Future and mission, in brackets. How much can subtle and spiritual ambition be hidden behind these concerns? Would it be possible to make use of this information? We believe that the most interesting of the questions that we should ask ourselves on this point could be the following. Do we need to know our mission? Do we need to know what our mission is in order to be able to make it concrete and thus fulfill what is planned for our existence? The current planetary culture responds to this and other concerns of this tendency that to carry out something we must know it. This mechanism of rational development releases energies which circulate in an opposite direction to the needs to be elevated by the current consciousness that governs this orb. To be able to concretize that for which we incarnate is no other thing than to go to the encounter of the planetary necessities and to seize them. We would be amazed to discover the immense quantity of beings who do not effectively use their potential, waiting for their mission to be relieved to them in this universe Earth. By focusing on the last question, we would discover the resolution of such an impenetrable mystery. We would perceive, for example, that our so-called mission could not be anything else but the continuous expression, without interference and interruption, of what is right and necessary on the part of our conscience, perhaps we would see clearly that the result of a correct and necessary action is nothing other than the intervention of our inner consciousness in the material counterpart of existence. It will be probably within our reach to understand that our personality and the reincarnating energy that uses it, the ego, does not have a certain potential by itself. Potential that it's inherent in the energies of our soul, and in case more voltage is needed, it could be even made available by our monada. We could not fail to observe at certain point that the term we are referring to indicates a task undertaken by our inner regency. It would be foreseeable at this point in our understanding the written mentioning of this question. We would feel this vibration closer to its own profound constitution. The mission, now in a different light, would no longer have anything to do with illusions and spiritual ambitions, but with the true missionary. That true and only missionary is our intern. Fulfilling our mission is nothing other than not interfering with the inner guidance. To give our soul the direction of our existence is to fulfill the only mission. If we could reach the clarifications by means of the energy of reflection, we would see that it would be senseless to believe that in order to fulfill what corresponds to us, we must first access the plans and see if we like the perspective. Every correct thought, every altruistic and elevated feeling, every action based on assistance of the legitimate needs is the task of our missionary. The mission of our souls is to restore the ceremonial of material existence, to install its extensions in matter within the genuine rhythms expressed by the great ritual of the cosmos. Some souls and the vehicles they use, based on exclusively evolutionary potentialities, assume tasks of a certain tenor. Tasks that could be defined by the speculative mind as one of the high profile, others, on the contrary, serve from anonymity, taking advantage of the benefits that it grants to collaborate in a circulation of energies which, if they excel, would be strongly besieged by the retrograde forces. From that point of view of the supernatural levels, there are no better or worse tasks. They are levels of giving, surrender, and receptivity. They are different degrees of evolution and manifestation. Our mission is like a portion of a large building, only in most cases we do not know in which part of the scaffolding we will be placed. Every correct and necessary action is a brick of that construction. If our existence is limited to express what is correct and necessary, that portion of the construction that corresponds to us will become concrete. The indication of what is correct and necessary will come from the depths of our consciousness. The transcendence of our scale of personal values and our free will give us the capacity to place each brick in its place. The soul guides the hands of the builder with humility, opens up the essence of wisdom. We are all here to express the evolutionary plan and the law of hierarchies. The secret of our mission lies in forgetting ourselves and understanding the importance of our capacity to give and transform. To abdicate as far as our impulses of choice and convenience are concerned. We have been prepared for thousands of years to understand the fundamental attitude for this planetary transition. the energy of prophets, watered with seeds, the aridity of human surface consciousness. It does not belong to the man who is walking, even to direct his step. Note 14. A few months ago, a person who came to our meetings for the second time declared himself powerless in the face of the fact that they could not be within the reach of a greater number of beings. In his comments, though well-intentioned, there was a lack of deep understanding of the current situation of humanity. His vision was compromised by a series of desires. We tried, at the time, to offer his consciousness another perspective of observation. The being was about to discover the influence that our own attitude infers to the psychic layer of the planet. There are many who are convinced that the action of a few cannot exert influence. Furthermore, in spite of having within their reach elements of internal origin, to understand this question, they cannot glimpse certain characteristics inherent in the action of the energy. We call our talks studies. We know that this term has, for humanity as a whole, a very different meaning from its internal or spiritual connotation. Through legitimate expressions of study, human consciousness can reduce the distance that separates it from the regency of a level of consciousness. A profound relationship must be established between the laws and us. When the impulse offered by an evolutionary law anchored in the element or nucleus for which is destined, unification is produced. This process is only a preamble to another one, which will have to unfold in relation to the higher patterns. When we are expressing these energies of study, the fundamental factor lies in not involving the speculative and analytical mind in it. Whether the state of study is reached through an inspired book or talk guided by nuclear inner life. The materialism proper to the concrete level of the mind prevents the true act of study from manifesting itself. If the concrete mind is transcended in those instances, our contribution to the dense layer of the planetary psyche becomes effective. In those moments, we begin to operate as a diluent of those elements that impede the light from being liberated and circulating in certain levels of consciousness. What the dynamics of these energies produce in our consciousness becomes available to other beings who, in the process of tuning, will be in a position to receive it. Everything that our consciousness can consolidate in response to evolutionary patterns releases energies. Over this, other consciousness will try to tune in. Today, in a simple and powerful way, the planetary consciousness puts within our reach archetypical patterns of singular conformation. By studying what is revealed to us, in this inner sense that we observe, we allow ourselves a conscious recognition of the presence of these archetypes. The cure is nothing more than the reconstruction of the archetypal pattern. These patterns, like all elements of cosmic life, have a certain dynamic. What is made available to us today differs promptly from what was revealed to us in the previous cycle. For this reason, that not only it's an attitude needed to understand what the term study should mean for us now, but we must also achieve sufficient openness to give ourselves accepting the elements to make that study concrete, as proposed to us by our inner nuclei. Every element protected by the current energies does not reach our consciousness if it is not through our inner being. It is the inner life that objectively, with the help of the karma law, designate the sequences and character of what will be most profitable for our evolution and that of the environment where it develops. At this present, as beings on the surface of the planet, we must arrive at the conscious understanding of the dynamics that participate in a planetary life. The revelations that are offered to us about multidimensional existence and in the various levels of this planetary universe are with their full potential in inspired books. The existence of intraterrestrial civilizations, the manifestation of the planetary mirrors, the information, mature and necessary in relation to the performance of the Brotherhood of the Cosmos, in its fundamental performance in the task of rescue. The expansions received regarding the activity of our inner nuclei. This conscious understanding to which we refer implies walking a path in a direction of the laws. Any one of us who begins his or her transit work to the extent of what has been genuinely traveled as a mirror where those laws are reflected. The capacity for self-observation predisposes our external consciousness to reach states of genuine study with greater flexibility. Being able to see ourselves with objectivity collaborates with the emptying of certain concepts in relation to ourselves. Gradually, we will discover in every element and situation a new reality. Our study will not be limited to a book, a tape, or an evolutionary talk. These specific elements from a certain point of view will help our perception. They will accompany us in our openness to intuitive life. They will accompany us in our openness to intuitive life. They will reveal to us, in relation to themselves, a mechanic which will be the beginning of our observation of existence. What study represents internally and spiritually will be seen by us as what it simply is. One of the paths of unification of consciousness and powerful dynamics related to the laws of synthesis and service. Note 15. Someone once expressed his inability to feel gratitude. This did not refer to the gratitude which more or less spontaneously arises in us when some personal desire is fulfilled, or we receive that which satisfies our senses and illusions. Nor does it mean that when hidden energy, an extension of the law, excuses from going through something that distresses and for which we see no way out. The person who told us this was referring to not being able to express gratitude in the moments where his external consciousness experienced strong purifying movements. In his comments, he explained that this extent of physical process or illnesses as well as to emotional and mental issues. We assured this being who could not understand that someone could be grateful to be going through an unpleasant or bitter purification. Certain characteristics that we evidence as incarnated egos are the deviation of the formation of internal realities, processes and dynamics typical of our deepest nuclei found in a human personality, a mirror of a strong distorting capacity. Contrary to what in many seems, our meetings today is not based on the study of the energy of the gratitude. This, like any other reality with inner origins of a certain magnitude, cannot be explained. None of us will express genuine gratitude until we put down our attitudes and dedicate ourselves to free the essence that is held in us as a prisoner. We were saying, lines backwards, that we are not in a position to allow the inner dynamics to be reflected in our personality without distorting it. The energy of will, present in the activity of our regent, fundamental in the action of the monada, of which we are an extension, is deviated in the ego, manifesting possessiveness. The sense of individuality, which the consciousness of the monada must experience in order to realize its purpose, becomes separative in these mirrors which we offer to the unique life. An analogous process occurs with the energy of the hierarchical lineages. These lineages offer the essential parameters for our course through material existence, parameters that, followed with lucidity, constitute the adequate tools to neutralize the influence currently indomitable that the material levels exert on our superficial consciousness. Even the most pragmatic observer could not fail to perceive in relation to these lineages, even if he does not know of their existence, that which this civilization points to us as rulers, wise men, healers, priests. The cultures that emerged in our civilization, the manifestation of a precise moment of the planetary consciousness driven to test complementarity, and that only ended in confrontation. We pointed out gratitude at first, our inability to express it in situations unfavorable to the preference of the ego. Here too, again, we may discover how a condition inherent in the mirror of the soul is limited by us. Gratitude is the return of energy. Our soul expresses genuine gratitude at every situation where it is placed for enlargement. It knows that the illusion to which it is subjected serves the unique need. The quality of the energy that returns through gratitude directs the dense particles towards the light. Only we, components of the superficial culture, do not prevent this and other characteristics of the inner activity from being deviated or limited. To ignore and accept that all suffering is conditioned by the return of our past actions of this or other levels. Relativizing the knowledge that the creative consciousness has for our existence and minimizing that what happens to us never escapes his will. We reach such a point of mental narrowness that, far from thanking the action of laws that grant us what that consciousness sees as propitious to our evolution, we ask in our prayers to take that weight off our shoulders. We know that we should not interfere with the transit of energy. Note 16. We accompany our essence as it is possible for us in the course of each incarnation. With the experience of each passage through the material levels, we approach the fulfillment of that which we initially promised to our unique life, to free that essence from the prison in which it is submerged. At the end of each one of those reincarnations, the synthesis of that promise is offered to us to rehearse. Great is the quantity of incarnations in which, not understanding that essence is our true consciousness, we subtract our collaboration so that it transmigrates from one level of existence to another. Thus the moment arrives when the light can be presented to us with greater intensity. we come to understand that no matter where, how, and in what way, this essence that we really are expressing its liberation. We perceive that it is indivisible and unalterable, that everything we love is present in it, and also in that which we do not yet have the capacity to love. We understand by its emanation that we never lose anything, that the unique life deprives us of nothing, that all that we call loss, it's only the misunderstood observation of the essence leaving a form to take refuge in another, in more accordance with the state of consciousness that it must reach. The hierarchy teaches that there is no possible loss in any area of the cosmos, that everything is continuous transformation. Here on this planet, each one of the beings who seeks to express their life through giving and service will be invited in different ways to leave their footprints in the unique consciousness, when with lucidity and understanding we help the liberation of the essence, no matter where it is encapsulated. The wake of that service, like a golden dew, carries other seeds, urging them to awake. How many elements and energies in varying degrees could have been used under another profile by our civilization if the understanding of what we call death were understood with simplicity? The material levels of existence would have been more available for approaching the inner sources. If the cultures that followed each other on the surface of this planet had perceived the ease granted by the law of death, the whole material vibratory pattern would have arrived at the manifestation of a superlative range that we perceive today. It is by means of this law that we can consider reincarnation experience to be over. Thus the material atoms, etheric, physical, emotional, and mental, can be returned to the reservoir of planetary matter. In this way, the being can prepare himself for his future incarnation with the conditions most in accordance with his evolutionary process. The need to abandon matter is given in order to reorient the reincarnating energy in relation to the internal nuclei that sustain it, and allow it to receive new customs according to what it will have to experience. Outside the concrete levels, we come into contact with sources of extraction, capable of providing the impulses and energies that the next life will demand of us with its requirements. Impulses and training which we could even receive outside the orbit of the planet, as well as in its internal or intraterrestrial levels. Our deepest truth is that which represents the essence that we retain in our certain degree of encapsulation, so that with greatest synthesis and economy, that essence can transmigrate through the forum of the different levels of consciousness, and our attitudes before what we call death must approach the inner optics. The most limited state that our consciousness can experience, it experiments while practicing its stay in matter. If we could glimpse this reality without the heavy emotional and mental burden which we usually face the exit of matter, we would have to make an effort so as not to define as true death the entry of the ego into the concrete levels. It is in material existence where our will, love, and intelligence are dark caricature of that triad, of the qualitative foundation of our inner nuclei. The law of death allows us, when our identification with the concrete levels has suppressed certain limits, to distance ourselves from the influence in a determined tenor and under those pieces of the law of karma, to reposition ourselves in matter under the most favorable conditions. In some way, when that which we should potentially realize on the concrete level was undertaken to a certain degree by the ego, this law allows its withdrawal. In this way, it predisposes the material junctures for a future incarnation where those achievements and transcendences will be the basis of the karmic process that will take place. The operating principle of every law is simplicity. Everything that does not express the dynamic that supports it is unrelated to the law. Simple is that which does not contain superfluous elements. The conjectures that serve for our exit from these levels of consciousness could have been very simple if our patterns of life and behavior lacked the superfluous. We were saying that our identification with the power games of the psychic layer complicated our relationship with the laws. The more unnecessary elements signify our life, the denser the layer of illusion that surrounds us. The correct attitude before the transit from one level of consciousness to another, and to be able to perceive this transmigration as really necessary, needs to be experienced to make our life simple. The forces that host matter are responsible for most of the interference in this matter. These dissuasive forces try in such a way to encapsulate us in the levels where they are sheltered. Taking advantage of our lack of inner enlightenment, they promote us uncorrective old vision of disincarnating. In many cases, they are helped by doctrines or lines of thought which sustained among their principles the discarding of reincarnation and the law of karma. Many incarnated egos, prisoners of that myopia concerning the interior reality, far from a simple and profound vision of the consecutiveness of existence, did not find in the psychological laws help in facing death. Therefore, confusing the principles of the law that governs it, convinced of the loss of identity and consciousness fostered by the involutive forces during thousands of years. These forces work in the opposite sense of the laws. The law of return, step by step, works staggeringly in the material universe through elements predisposed by the law of death. Accepting our course from one side of existence to another as a stage which we must take advantage of and transcend in an evolutionary manner allow us to become apt to follow the law of return. To accept with humility what the laws propose would allow us to predispose ourselves to follow without deviations the energy that these times of revelation offer. We are invited to understand that life does not keep preferences for one side or another of its manifestation, that the place to which we are returning is located in the center of creation, far beyond, of course, what we call outside or inside in this childish learning, experienced in two phases of physical cosmic existence. Note 17. When we walk the path of our interior, we begin to perceive existence in a way very different from the common dominator of the surface of this planet. While for those who observe us and who have not yet taken certain steps, our life is poor, tasteless, lacking attractions, whereas for us the dynamic of existence becomes more active at every moment. The basis of this dynamic is very simple to understand. It will be enough for us to imagine the string of a violin covered by a large number of superimposed covers. The different layers of a material, which with its presence and coating prevents the string from responding to the incentive that would allow it to express its penetrating and precise sound. While we work with superior orientation, the purification of our conscious approaches the expression of that which corresponds to us. The more the string is offered to the action of the bow, the more it wears away the layers that imprison it. What constricts the string is that which is not in the right place and therefore not necessary. What gives the string its virtue is precisely the simplicity of its composition. Everything superfluous drowns it. Everything superfluous drowns us. All there is not of simplicity is superficiality. That is to say, it covers the essential and profound and separates it from the superior. The simplification of our life gives an increase in that dynamic. The dense vibration that covers our essence must be transmuted, must be removed. To raise the vibratory pattern of our external consciousness is to allow the chords that we are to be closer and closer to deliver its genuine sonority. The distance that separates us from the hierarchies is no other than the thickness of those layers that drown out our essence. The distance that separates us from the Creator is nothing else. The differences between each particle of existence do not lie in what each one of them holds in its nucleus, but in a form that keeps the essence encapsulated. For the essence to resolve each stage of its evolution, successive degrees of simplicity must be achieved. Each level of existence and consciousness offers different parameters of this energy of simplicity. At each stage of the evolutionary course of this civilization, expressing this condition required different incarnations in the law of purification. What could be more important for a being than to express intimately that which he is? In order for this to happen, we would have to comply with the trajectory which at this level of existence the unique life offers to the ends. The trajectory inevitably goes from the superficial to the profound, as the only means of contact with the superior. Once we know that which abounds in the inner life, we gradually open ourselves up to the encounter with the high. The path to the confines of our interior is sustained by the capacity to transcend the superfluous, in the amplitude with which we penetrate our superficiality, in the orderly concatenation of what is correct and necessary. The entrance of that first world that we will know, before accessing others of which it's only a reflection, must be symbolized by the material that emerges from such a mining exercise. The law demonstrates that when this reality happens, the precious treasure emerges from the new field. Harmony, inner peace, and the beneficial irradiation of the unalterable, the essence as revealed to us by the instruction, is indivisible. Therefore, it is not able to serve as a nucleus of expression of anything that is not expressed by the superior order. Everything that is not expressed by the order simply imprisons it, maintains it in a certain degree of encapsulation. The external consciousness of human beings cannot avoid, until a certain stage is completed, deviating itself between two flows present in these levels of existence. The inhibition of the subtle, represented by the dissuasive forces, and the liberating impulses granted by the internal consciousness itself. As long as these two flows, arranged by the law of evolution, allow us to continue expressing the visibility on the external levels of existence, that which needs us unconditionally will not obtain us. To be able to continue being divided must be seen as that which we must transcend, and not as a viable option to perpetuate a form of life. Energy obtains us through giving ourselves and surrender. The donation of our consciousness is the true and first service we perform of unimaginable scope. Before this happens, the word service is spelled out only in the fire of our soul. Service is the positioning of consciousness, the positioning of what is correct and necessary, the positioning of the absolutely simple, of what cannot be divided, nor does it seek to express deviation. Somehow we are made to know that sooner or later we must manifest ourselves as co-creators, that is, to manifest as auxiliaries of that transit, of that which flows from the cosmic mind and needs to be imprinted on the levels where we are serving. When those who look at us without understanding cannot penetrate the reality in which we participate, they cannot do so because of the vibratory incompatibility. By continuously feeding the culture of the superfluous, a being loses the capacity to recognize the external face transfigured by the internal action. The existence aligned to the inner vortex is a strong dispenser of a symbolic energy. What our attitudes can contribute to the planetary consciousness is of a great transmuting power. By referring to the energy of the symbols, the hierarchy of instruction manifests that which is given by a symbol and cannot be transmitted by any other language. Even though on this planet we have at our disposal a wide range of information aimed to assist our polarization towards the supernatural levels, nothing can replace the effect produced in our consciousness by a being that symbolizes what humanity must practice and, to a certain degree, achieve. Our inner nuclei find a way to send the signals when they put us in the front of that which symbolize future stages of our existence. To serve is to be a symbol of the next stage of consciousness to be developed by this humanity. Simplicity is the mirror where you can best reflect yourself. Note 18th. In relation to this new knowledge, which is being made available to humanity, when we come across a new terminology, we must understand the need for its assistance. Some time ago, two people with whom I established a circumstantial connection referred to certain terms that we used as being far-fetched. One of them said she had listened to a tape of our talks and had spent several days trying to find out what we called monada on that tape. With a certain touch of good humor, she said that she had disturbed several of her friends who were studying these matters too, without them being able to give her any guidance. At the end of that meeting, seemingly, a request was made to me. Would it be possible for you to explain the difference between spirit and monada? I believe that something similar to what happened to me must have happened to many people. I said goodbye to those people with gratitude and the intention to fulfill what that request had generated in my consciousness. During the previous cycle, humanity in general was able to access certain information in a restricted manner. This restriction could inevitably have been framed in a very different way if our contact with the material forces had been coated with more subtle and mature nuances. In that sense, is that certain information about the internal reality come to our mind in an impoverished way. What did the term spirit mean for our consciousness during the whole previous cycle? In general way, it is installed in this humanity a strange concept about this inner core. For most, it is something that is not seen, but which is supposed to be within us, as a kind of a double, something not very defined, but which must surely have particular importance for God. Some imagine him to be anthropomorphic, bearing his same virtues and defects. There is no lack of faces in this civilization that confirms this statement. He is a poor in spirit, or he is a noble spirit, or he has a spirited spirit, and even more, he has a competitive spirit, he is a restless spirit, he has an artistic spirit, he has an adventurous spirit. There are many faces that could be used to support this characteristic of what we believe to be the spirit. In short, it seems that in our real knowledge about this internal nucleus abounds more in fantasy than in legitimate information of an evolutionary nature. Since ancient times, only the flame bearers, the hierophants, and the initiates had the genuine information about the spiritual consciousness. In spite of this information was limited by the planetary consciousness. Men on the surface of the planet could not yet draw back some veils that hid deep supernatural realities. Thousands of years had to go by before the new polarity of the energy laid the foundations of this transit. From a certain point of view, we could assure you that the term spirit is only a limited and limiting externalization of what we call monada. The charge given by the psychic energies to the word spirit makes it impossible to use it in a stage of inner revelations. That which this humanity dominates in that matter, and which is covered with the energy of the psychic laws, does not seem to be the cosmic nucleus which in constant evolution travels through the different kingdoms. In general way, this humanity believes more in the progress of matter than in the infinite activity of inner evolution. The differences when referring to this internal nucleus as a spirit or as a monada are immense. And in spite of speaking of the same thing, an abyss of cosmic depths opens up between them. The profound difference lays in the information revealed in this stage of planetary transition. Our spirit, which today we call monada, in order to dissociate it from the infantile and defenseless image, is in reality a mirror. Powerful energies are projected onto its substance, and after being adapted, they proceed to another levels of existence. Like every evolving particle within a certain level of consciousness and existence, it must participate and reach different degrees of manifestation. If it were in observation of its evolutionary trajectory, the monadas are one of the most important elements in the configuration of the universes. From a certain point of view, it could be said that these universes are formed so that they concretize their evolution. A fellow group member carrying out an information task in a talk defined the difference between these two meanings, highlighting the monada's awakening, that is, the monada becoming aware of its cosmic reality and destiny. The companion certainly contributed one of the data to be taken into account in this redimensioning of what this humanity calls spirit. However, that one represented only one of the data to be taken into account, while the so-called spirit had an origin that was not very clear for this humanity, except in the traditional concept of being the work of the divinity. The monad, however, explicitly revealed itself as an extension of a nucleus of consciousness called the regent, father, or eighth monad. Its appearance to the cosmic existence has a particularity that the concept of spirit would not leave any margin to contain. The monad is projected in that ambit at the same time as 6 other sisters monads. Furthermore, after serving the regent as a tool of contact and learning of the material laws, the monad must fulfill its sublime destiny, an unthinkable destiny, for that crystallized spiritual concept of the previous cycle. The 7 sisters in a single cosmic ceremonial movement will be reabsorbed into that nucleus that projected them. The result of the ceremonial movement is their participation in a greater one. The regent, having reabsorbed his 7 extensions in a material universe and other energies dominated principles, polarized in an adjacent interface with the immaterial strip of existence, is elevated to the degree of avatar. The knowledge that our monads participate in groups and schools in internal levels of existence was unknown for the previous stage. The monad's transmutation, an inner and cosmic ceremony, also remained veiled, and in this stage of the awakening of the inner consciousness, it is a tool to experience the interaction with the higher laws. That is when a monad gives its bodies in a specific level to another more evolved monad in a position to use them with greater benefit for the planetary situation and the evolutionary plan to manifest. Thus we could see that the term spirit represents the limitations with which the consciousness of this humanity was open to internal knowledge, creating, to the extent of its ignorance, an entity that grimly could assume the dynamics of that mighty and powerful inner mirror. The monad represents the revelation of a new scale of life and existence. It is the pilgrim who, in his imperturbable transit through different kingdoms and levels of existence, prepares the takeoff of the cosmic man. Life, which our soul breathes into us, comes from his will, which is none other than the unique will. The road we must travel to it, it's a milestone, perhaps the greatest since our arrival in the human kingdom. The monad represents something which was never represented by the human consciousness before, what we call spirit. The highest fires of creation and the living presence of hierarchy pulsating in our interior. Words and knowledge are simply energy. It is in our path to perceive which words bring a certain potential in the encounter with knowledge offered in each cycle.